Too awfully long. With me today is Valerie Moller, a preeminent and world-renowned well-being researcher. We're very honored to have Dr. Moller with us today. Valerie, can you tell us your current title and institutional affiliation?
Thank you. At the moment I'm Emeritus Professor and the Institute of Social and Economic Research at Rhodes University. It's in Grahamstown, South Africa. It's a small university.
Thank you. Valerie, what do you see as your main contributions to the field of well-being?
What we've tried to do is to track well-being in South Africa as far back as from the late 1970s, about after the time when it's first started with Andrews and Withy and
Yes.
Campbell and his colleagues. And
Yes, I'm familiar. They
so-
inspired me too. It's
Exactly,
wonderful,
yes.
huh?
And so we've done that. We've tracked them since that in about 11 waves: happiness and life satisfaction.
How did you get into this area of research?
It all happened through the director of the institute where I was working at the time. I was in Durban at the University of today, KwaZulu-Natal, and my colleague, director of the institute, he came with 2 books and he said, I think we should look at quality of life of South Africans. I think he thought that South Africans who smiled were not necessarily happy under apartheid days. And so I read the 2 books and I was hooked. It was sort of the old school sociology from the Institute of Social Research.
Yes.
Where it was just so engaging and it seemed so practical and thoughtful. And on Monday we discussed it and we just got on with it.
Well, it's amazing. And you say 11 waves, so this is 11 years that you've assessed the well-being of South Africans?
It's over a period of 3 decades from 19...
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's
because
amazing.
we didn't always have money, so whenever we had money or funds, then we put it into a national survey.
Is this the first well-being survey done in South Africa?
Its predecessor, the director of the institute, Lawrence Schlemmer, he'd helped a German professor who was a conflict researcher. He'd helped him collect data in South Africa, looking at the prospects for peaceful change in South Africa. And so they tried more or less the smiley test, and they had a small group of black South Africans that were included in the survey. It wasn't, nationally representative,
Yes.
just to get an idea. And I think possibly that Lawrence Schlemmer remembered that, and so he thought, at the time we said that quality of life is sort of a used and abused word, and maybe it was being used in the wrong sense, so we thought that we should look into it. And
Very good.
I suppose we're always curious,
So you really brought the science of well-being to this enterprise.
Yes, because it was just the age of social indicators. And it was the time when there was a publication of whatever happened to social indicators. And I visited with Professor Wolfgang Glutz in Germany, and he gave me a copy of the off-print, I think. I think Andrews and Withy was the one who compiled it must have been
Very
a public
good.
opinion quarterly, and so that's how I got to know the other side of it. I think Wolfgang Zapf in Europe was Wolfgang Glutzer's mentor, and so
Yes,
we had it on both sides of the ocean.
Very good, very good. And what was your training?
I'm a sociologist by training.
Very
I
good.
studied at the University of Zurich,
Ah.
and when we completed our studies, we wanted to go someplace else, and so we decided to go to Africa. Everybody else was going to India at that time, so we came, my husband and I, he was Danish, we came to Africa in a Volkswagen Kombi.
Wow. Very adventuresome.
Yes, it was a year old.
So you're a trailblazer in bringing this well-being approach to assessment to South Africa. Any other milestones in your career? That's enough for for 5 careers for most people. But are there any other contributions you're particularly proud of? Do you want to tell us about?
That probably would be. We thought it's not just enough to look at happiness and life satisfaction. Of course, originally we had many indicators, which we thought the idea was to monitor them, maybe 30 indicators that worked very well in the first analysis over time. But in the end, it was boiled down to maybe 3 indicators. We also looked at expectations for the future, was one of them, that longer trends. So in any study I did, any field, we looked at domains ranging from unemployment to poverty, housing, development, social protection, and among the youth and the elderly. And so we always included the life satisfaction and happiness measures in all these studies, just to flesh it out, to see how things work, so you could interpret your data.
What are the practical implications of this work?
I suppose the most exciting time was that we captured the moment of democracy coming to South Africa.
How exciting.
Yep. It was, by chance, the same Theodor Humph, who, the conflict researcher, was heading the European Union delegation as an election observer for the first open elections in 1994, April 94. And I'd been on sabbatical that year and didn't have a research project, and I knew that he probably wouldn't have time to write up a study on voter education, evaluating the voter education that the first-time voters had received. So I offered to write it up for him, the study, and I said, well, could he also include the happiness items that we've been using, the same ones? I mean, I suppose he'd done it before. And so this is how we found out that all South Africans, black and white, were equally happy at levels that the same levels you'd find in established democracies. That kind of, it was a
how exciting! That's very exciting.
Yes, I think so. I emailed. I think we had email at that time and contacted people like Ed Diener. You know, have you found this kind of sort of thing? And after that, I think he invited me to come to a conference, one of the conferences, and to report on this finding. I think that was the highlight in the whole trends, because election euphoria didn't last that long, and so
Well, it's a wonderful thing that you did, and I think what's especially impressive is you networked with other leaders in the field and didn't reinvent the wheel to that extent, but also could adjust your work to the particularities of South Africa. Are there any findings you can share with us that were noteworthy to you, either in the early days or middle or more recently in your assessments of the quality of life of South Africa?
Maybe in the early days, what struck us, because we started out and we had objective indicators, sort of more along the basic needs sort of kind of thing. And we found that the subjective indicators in the domains, they mirrored, they were so closely related. And so we thought, well, you know, budgets are always tight. We don't need those indicators because you always have about 30 background demographics.
You thought they were superfluous.
We concentrated on the subjective in future. And so that was one finding. The other finding was the disparity between black and white South Africans, the better off, and the people who had a long history of oppression under colonialism, and was that optimism for the future. There was a crossover. Black South Africans very optimistic for the future, whereas white South Africans were a bit more cautious and maybe the status quo. And until recently, I thought that this was unique to South Africa. Having gone back to Hadley Cantrell's study in the 13 nations in the 60s, found that this is quite common, that in most cases people are more optimistic about the future. And recently with colleagues, with my colleague Benjamin Roberts, we've replicated the original Cantrell study with the full set of questions, and also using his coding scheme, which worked beautifully. And the foresight is that the sensitivities, usually things don't translate very well.
Mhm.
We're very conscious that most of our indicators in the work come from the core areas, from
Yes.
the richer countries, and things get lost in translation, and we're worried about the meanings. And I think Cantrill just had those sensitivities. He was working in 13 different countries, and
Yes.
it must have worked so well, so it worked for us too. So I think that's quite exciting to
Yes.
replicate things over time.
Very much, and what a pioneering figure he was. Any results from this replication you can share with us? Any particular results at this point? Or are you still analyzing the data?
We're still analysing
Okay.
the data. I have looked at some things, and yes, I think in South Africa, maybe newcomers, I think people have come more sophisticated in their evaluation of their society, because we look not only at personal well-being but also national concerns, hopes
Yes.
and fears for the nation.
Very good.
Which I think is quite interesting. And
Mhm.
I'm amazed from the voices across the board. I coded the open-ended myself, which I thought was very exciting. And I
Yes.
didn't really know who was speaking, and when we got the results through, I thought I had it all wrong. And in the sense that they were very sophisticated, very critical concerns right across the board. So I think that's a sign that democracy is deepening, that people are not just being loyal to the original struggle party, the anti-apartheid,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
the original African National Congress,
Mhm.
who's been the ruling party since, freedom fighters turned government.
Yes,
sort of thing.
yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Well, any other results from that open-ended question you could share with us in terms of people's responses or ideas?
I think very important is coming through some of the concerns in a collectivist society, well, maybe moving from collectivist to individualistic, the great importance of the family, concern about the family and the family's future and the next generation. So there's hopes for jobs. Also, the ideal of the Rainbow Nation. We've looked at national pride over time in connection with things. That the Rainbow Nation, I think, is still seen as an ideal, even though, if we fail, sort of thing. And that there should be harmony in society and concern about that politicians, the leaders in the country, should be good leaders and democracy. So I think it's quite
So it's very inspiring in a way, and people are optimistic about this new era of South Africa working out.
We've also pioneered something else. There's the Cantrill scale is also self-defined, the anchors of the scale.
Yes.
And we've looked at the AXA Measure, which was meant to, I think it was Jan Bernheim introduced it. He was following cancer patients, and so it gave him an entree, so that people wouldn't just give superficial answers. And health quality of life is not only concerned about the disease or morbidity, but about the whole person.
Yes.
And so we piloted the measure in South Africa first at the community level, and also in a general community setting and not among patients, which had been before. And at the same study in 2012, national study, we had several measures of well-being. One single item one's the Cantrill measure, and also the AXA measure that looks at the anchors are the best and the worst times in your life. And that's been very interesting, the results. As in other countries, the family is very, but also material living standards are very important. So you see that the idea in Africa that democracy should also bring the better life in terms of the material underpinnings of democracy. And you also see that the changes sort of that we're having, was one commentator said, from a controlled society in South Africa under apartheid and colonialism to a consumer society. And some of the milestones or the transitions to adulthood, the best times in life included things like my first cell phone, the first car, the first house, and also, of course, marriage, finding a partner, which are the common things.
Yes.
But I thought that was quite new, that I don't think one would expect it, as well as, say, initiation, male initiation,
Yes.
coming of age.
Yes,
things,
coming
of age, but cell phone, the first cell
Yes.
phone can equally be a new coming of age symbol.
Yes, I think so too. That's very interesting. Anything else you see in terms of the quality of life of South Africa, in terms of a challenge or another success story?
Like many transition countries, we're moving. There are many challenges. I think one of the youth dividend needs to be realized. So one of the things that, especially my colleague is looking at, we're looking at the born frees, the young generation that has grown up without, the burden of apartheid, but they still have challenges in terms of education, not enough skills in order to, and we have very high unemployment rates. So we haven't had an Arab Spring further down.
Hasn't gone down yet, yes.
But it could be, sort of waiting to happen.
Well,
It's worldwide in part a problem,
yes.
But maybe
Well,
it's more severe.
I think it's a wonderful thing that you're thinking about the born freeds in such a poetic way. Let me ask you this: what do you see as a challenge in terms of keeping the well-being research field vibrant and growing? What do you see as necessary there?
Well, what has been very exciting, MIQOLS has helped us. He's come twice to South Africa, and we've had roving conferences where he's traveled from 3 centers, because it's a vast country, to meet people, to tell them about social indicators and quality of life research. And then in turn they've outlined their research interests, the projects they're working on. And since that time, if you read submissions to our journals, there's a growing group of people interested in the field. We've now got economists who are doing, the usual things economists do.
How exciting! You're recruiting more new academics.
And independently, I find that there are people I didn't know are doing this work. So I think we need to repeat this, the idea of the roving conference.
I see.
And we've also got colleagues who are working in positive psychology. So and they actually have annual conferences in positive psychology.
How exciting!
So the next generation is already there.
That's very good news.
So it's nice to know.
I think another thing that's inspiring is that you were a pioneer in this field, but also a woman pioneer in academia. Is that what kind of obstacles did you face in that regard, and how can young women overcome them today?
I think I was fortunate. I just found my male colleagues were very supportive, and we worked as a team. Research was always very exciting. And,
so you didn't feel a lot of discrimination or mistreatment?
I know so many of my women colleagues talk about this, but I must have just been lucky.
Well, that's a wonderful thing. Do you see sufficient numbers of women being attracted to academia today, and are there ways we can encourage them?
I think you're probably getting a disproportion that you will have more women in academia than before, which I think might become a problem. We don't want to scare away the men. There's a good balance, slightly different perspective.
So there's no problem in attracting women to academia?
Well, in South Africa, we do have affirmative action, so there's great support for women coming into universities and schooling. So would you say that's an important social initiative or program? Yes, I think in terms of gender equality,
Mhm.
of course, racial equality is very important in South Africa to make up for lost time.
Yes, yes.
So there's plenty of support in that respect.
Well, that's very exciting, and thank you for sharing your groundbreaking work. You're a great inspiration to us all, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you.